The businessman in seat 12A had been staring at Keisha for 20 minutes straight. Not the kind of look that made you feel noticed or pretty. The kind that made your skin crawl and your heart race with fear. His eyes followed every move she made as she tried to comfort her crying 3-year-old daughter Amara in the cramped airplane seat. When Keisha reached into her diaper bag for crackers, he watched. When she bounced Amara on her knee, he watched. When she whispered soft lullabies in her daughter's ear, he watched with a smile that made her stomach turn. "Excuse me, miss," he said, leaning across the aisle with breath that smelled like stale coffee and something worse. "Your kid's been crying for half an hour. Some of us are trying to work here." Keisha felt her cheeks burn hot. She had been doing everything possible to keep Amara quiet during the turbulence that had scared the toddler into tears. The little girl's face was red and streaked with tears, her small hands clinging to her mother's shirt like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," Keisha whispered, bouncing Amara gently. "She's scared of the bumps." "I'm doing my best." The man made a sound like a snort. "Your best isn't good enough. Maybe you should have thought about that before bringing a baby on a plane." Other passengers began to turn and look. Keisha felt like she was shrinking into her seat, wishing she could disappear. She had saved for months to afford these plane tickets to visit her grandmother in Georgia, the woman who had raised her after her own mother died when she was 12. Grandma Rose was turning 90 and had specifically asked to meet her great-granddaughter before she got too old to remember faces. "Sir, please," Keisha said quietly. "She'll calm down soon." But the man wasn't finished. He stood up from his seat and moved closer, his voice getting louder. "Listen here, girl. I paid good money for this ticket, and I don't need to listen to your kid screaming the whole flight. Why don't you take her to the bathroom or something?" The airplane bathroom. Keisha's heart sank. She had been in those tiny spaces before, barely big enough for one person, let alone a mother trying to calm a scared child. But other passengers were starting to stare and whisper, and she felt the familiar weight of being the only black woman in this section of the plane. "Maybe I should," she started to say, even though the seatbelt sign was still on and they were hitting more turbulence. That's when the man in the window seat next to her spoke up. "Actually, sir, I think you should sit back down." Keisha turned to look at him for the first time since boarding. He was a black man, probably in his 50s, with graying hair cut neat and short. He wore a simple polo shirt and jeans, but something about the way he sat straight-backed and alert reminded her of her grandfather's old military photos. The businessman scoffed. "Oh great, now we got two of them ganging up on me." The words hit Keisha like a slap. She had heard comments like that before, usually whispered behind her back at work or muttered by strangers in stores. But never so openly, never so boldly. She felt Amara's grip tighten on her shirt and realized her daughter could sense the tension in the air. "Excuse me." The man in the window seat stood up slowly. He wasn't particularly tall, but something about his presence made the businessman take a step back. "You heard me," the businessman said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "I don't need a lecture from you people about how I should feel about screaming kids on airplanes." The entire section of the plane had gone quiet now. Even the flight attendants had stopped their service to watch what was happening. Keisha wanted to disappear. She wanted to grab Amara and run, but there was nowhere to go at 30,000 feet in the air. "Sir," the man next to her said in a voice that was calm but carried weight, "I'm going to ask you one more time to return to your seat." This mother is doing everything she can to comfort her child during turbulence that, frankly, would scare most adults. The businessman's face was getting red. "Don't tell me what to do. I have every right to complain about the noise." "You have the right to complain," the man agreed. "You don't have the right to harass a woman and her child with racial slurs and intimidation." Keisha felt tears starting to form in her eyes. Not just from embarrassment, but from something else, relief that someone was standing up for her. In her 28 years, she had learned to expect that she would have to fight these battles alone. "I wasn't using racial slurs," the businessman protested, but his voice was weaker now. "You people is enough," the man said firmly. "Now sit down." The businessman looked around the plane, perhaps hoping for support from other passengers, but found only uncomfortable stares and disapproving faces. He muttered something under his breath and returned to his seat, but continued to glare at Keisha and Amara. Keisha felt her hands shaking as she tried to comfort her daughter, who had finally stopped crying but was now hiccuping quietly against her chest. The man next to her sat back down and, without saying anything, pulled out his phone and began typing something quickly. "Thank you," Keisha whispered to him. He looked up from his phone and gave her a kind smile. "Don't mention it." "How old is she?" 3, Keisha said, stroking Amara's hair. "This is her first time on a plane. She was so excited until we hit the bumps." "First flights can be scary," he said gently. "I remember my daughter's first flight. She threw up on me twice." Keisha felt herself relax slightly. "You have a daughter." "2 daughters and a son," he said. "All grown now. The youngest just graduated from Howard University." Howard University. Keisha had dreamed of going there once, before life got complicated and expensive. Before she found herself pregnant at 24 with a man who disappeared the moment she told him the news. Before she had to drop out of nursing school to work double shifts at the hospital cafeteria to pay for diapers and daycare. "That's wonderful," she said, and meant it. The man was still typing on his phone, his expression serious. "What's your daughter's name?" "Amara," Keisha said. "It means grace in Sanskrit. I learned that in a world religions class I took in college." "Beautiful name," he said. "I'm Robert, by the way, Robert Washington." "Keisha." "Keisha Johnson." She shifted Amara to her other arm. "I really appreciate what you did back there. Most people just pretend they don't see things like that happening." Robert looked up from his phone with an expression that seemed sad and knowing at the same time. "Trust me, I see it, and I don't let it slide." Something in his tone made Keisha curious, but before she could ask what he meant, a flight attendant approached their row. But she wasn't coming to ask them to quiet down or move to the bathroom. Instead, she leaned down to speak quietly to Robert. "Sir, I've spoken with the captain. He's aware of the situation and asked me to let you know that security will be waiting when we land." Robert nodded. "Thank you, Sarah." The flight attendant smiled at Keisha and Amara. "Can I get you anything? Some juice for the little one? Extra pretzels?" Keisha was confused by the special treatment but grateful. "Some apple juice would be great, thank you." After the flight attendant left, Keisha turned to Robert. "How did she know your name?" Robert looked uncomfortable for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "I fly this route pretty regularly. Sarah and I have worked together before." It wasn't exactly an answer, but before Keisha could ask more questions, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're beginning our descent into Atlanta. Flight attendants, please prepare for landing." Keisha felt her stomach drop, and not just from the change in altitude. In less than an hour, she would be off this plane and back to her real life. Back to working 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet. Back to the tiny apartment where the heat didn't work properly, and the neighbors complained about Amara's normal 3-year-old noises. Back to feeling alone in the world except for her daughter. But for these few minutes, sitting next to Robert, she had felt protected. She had felt like someone cared whether she was treated fairly. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. As the plane descended through the clouds toward Atlanta, Keisha looked out the window at the city lights below. Somewhere down there was Grandma Rose, waiting to meet her great-granddaughter for the first time. Somewhere down there was a weekend of family and love, and the kind of Sunday dinners that filled your stomach and your heart. But also somewhere down there was Monday morning, when she would have to return to reality. The businessman in 12A was packing up his laptop, shooting occasional angry looks in their direction. Keisha tried to ignore him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter wasn't over. Men like him didn't like being embarrassed in public, especially by people they looked down upon. As if reading her thoughts, Robert leaned over slightly. "Don't worry about him," he said quietly. Some battles are bigger than the people who start them. Keisha didn't understand what he meant, but something about the way he said it made her feel safer. As the plane touched down on the runway with a gentle bump, she found herself wishing the flight could last just a little longer. The plane had barely stopped moving when the businessman from 12A stood up aggressively, pushing past other passengers who were still gathering their belongings. Keisha watched nervously as he made his way toward the exit, shooting one last hostile look in her direction. "Stay seated for just a moment," Robert said quietly, his hand gently touching her arm. "Let the crowd thin out first." Keisha was grateful for the suggestion. Amara had fallen asleep against her chest during the landing, and she didn't want to wake her by rushing into the crowded aisle. Plus, something about Robert's calm presence made her feel like everything would be okay. As passengers filed past them, many smiled at sleeping Amara or nodded politely at Robert. Keisha noticed that several people seemed to recognize him, though she couldn't figure out why. A businessman in an expensive suit actually stopped to shake Robert's hand. "Good to see you again, sir," the man said respectfully. "Hope you had a good flight." "Thank you, Michael. Give my regards to your wife." After the man left, Keisha looked at Robert curiously. "You really do fly this route a lot." Robert smiled but didn't elaborate. "Are you ready?" They made their way slowly down the aisle, Robert carrying Keisha's heavy diaper bag without being asked. As they approached the exit, Keisha could see several uniformed airport security officers waiting just outside the gate. Her heart started racing. Had they come for her? Had someone complained about the disturbance on the plane? She had dealt with situations before where she was automatically assumed to be the problem, simply because of how she looked. "It's okay," Robert said, noticing her tension. "They're not here for you." Sure enough, as soon as they stepped off the plane, one of the security officers approached the businessman from 12A, who was standing near the gate looking confused and angry. "Sir, we need to speak with you about an incident on the flight." "What incident?" the man protested. "I didn't do anything wrong. That woman's kid was screaming and disturbing everyone." The security officer looked at his notepad. "We have reports of harassment and the use of discriminatory language toward other passengers." "That's ridiculous. I have rights." "Yes, sir, you do, and so does everyone else." "Please come with us." As the businessman was escorted away, still protesting loudly, Keisha stood frozen in amazement. She had never seen someone face consequences for the kind of behavior she experienced regularly. Usually, complaints like hers were dismissed or ignored. "How?" she asked Robert. "How did they know what happened?" Robert held up his phone. "I sent a detailed report to airline security during the flight, with names, seat numbers, and witness information." Keisha stared at him. "They actually listened to you." "They listen when they have to," Robert said simply. Before Keisha could ask what that meant, a young woman in an airline uniform approached them. "Mr. Washington, I'm Jennifer from customer service. We wanted to apologize for the incident on your flight today." "The apology should go to Ms. Johnson here," Robert said, gesturing to Keisha. "She and her daughter were the ones who were harassed." Jennifer turned to Keisha with a concerned expression. "Ma'am, I am so sorry about what happened. We've already spoken with the passenger in question, and he will not be flying with our airline again." Keisha felt like she was in a dream. Airlines didn't ban passengers for being rude to her. Customer service representatives didn't seek her out to apologize. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like her. "We'd also like to offer you and your daughter complimentary tickets for your return flight," Jennifer continued. "And we're upgrading you to first class." That's not necessary," Keisha stammered. "Yes, it is," Robert said firmly. "You shouldn't have to pay for a return flight after being mistreated on the one you already paid for." Jennifer nodded. "Absolutely, I have the tickets right here." She handed Keisha an envelope. "Again, our sincere apologies. We want all our passengers to feel safe and respected." After Jennifer left, Keisha turned to Robert with tears in her eyes. "I don't understand. Why are they treating me like this? Usually when something like this happens, I'm the one who gets blamed. Robert's expression grew sad. That shouldn't be usual for you, Keisha. No one should have to accept harassment as normal. They walked together toward baggage claim, Amara still sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. The airport was busy with typical Friday evening travelers, but Keisha felt like she was walking in a bubble of protection with Robert beside her. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they waited for the luggage carousel to start moving. "Of course. What do you do for work? I mean, I know it's none of my business, but the way people treat you, the way the airline responded. You're not just a regular passenger, are you?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, watching the empty carousel. "I work for the government." "What kind of government work?" Another pause, "The kind that requires me to travel a lot." It wasn't really an answer, but Keisha sensed he wasn't comfortable talking about it. Maybe he worked for the Postal Service or the IRS. Maybe he was just being modest about having some kind of customer service connections. The baggage carousel started moving, and they both looked for their luggage. Keisha spotted her worn duffel bag quickly. It was easy to find because it was held together with duct tape in two places. "That one's mine," she said, pointing. Robert grabbed it before she could reach for it. "I've got it." "You don't have to." "I want to." His own luggage was a simple black rolling suitcase that looked like it had seen a lot of airports. As they headed toward the exit, Keisha realized she didn't want to say goodbye to Robert. Not yet, for the first time in years, she had felt like someone was genuinely looking out for her. "Where are you headed?" she asked. "I'm being picked up," he said. "What about you?" "My grandmother is sending her neighbor to get me, Mrs. Peterson. She's probably waiting outside." They walked through the automatic doors into the warm Georgia evening air. The pickup area was crowded with cars and taxis, and people hugging each other hello. Keisha looked around for Mrs. Peterson, whom she had met only once years ago. Keisha, honey." A small black woman in her 70s was waving enthusiastically from beside an old blue sedan. Mrs. Peterson looked exactly the same as Keisha remembered, tiny but fierce, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and wearing her Sunday best even though it was Friday evening. "There she is," Keisha said, waving back. As they approached the car, Mrs. Peterson's eyes grew wide when she saw Robert carrying Keisha's bag. "Well, I'll be," she said. "Sir, I hope my girl wasn't bothering you on that airplane." "Not at all," Robert said with a smile. "It was my pleasure to meet her and Amara." Mrs. Peterson looked back and forth between them with the expression of someone trying to figure out a puzzle. Well, any friend of Keisha's is welcome any time." Robert helped load Keisha's bag into the trunk of Mrs. Peterson's car, then gently transferred the still sleeping Amara to her car seat. His movements were careful and practiced, like someone who had done this many times before with his own children. "Thank you," Keisha said as he closed the car door softly. "For everything today. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay anything," Robert said. "Just enjoy your time with your grandmother." A black SUV pulled up behind Mrs. Peterson's car and Robert glanced toward it. "That's my ride." Keisha felt a sudden panic. She might never see this man again, this person who had made her feel protected and valued and heard. "Wait," she said quickly. "Can I? Do you have a business card or something? I'd like to thank you properly." Robert hesitated, then pulled out his wallet and handed her a simple white card. "My email is on there." "But really, Keisha, you don't owe me anything." Before she could look at the card, he was walking toward the SUV. The driver, a young man in a military uniform, got out and saluted him. "Good evening, General." Keisha's blood went cold. "General." She looked down at the business card in her hand and felt her knees go weak. "General Robert Washington, United States Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff." Mrs. Peterson, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop, let out a low whistle. "Child, do you know who that man is?" Keisha stared at the SUV as it pulled away, Robert visible through the rear window. "I'm starting to think I don't know anything at all." The drive to Grandma Rose's house should have been filled with catching up and excitement about the reunion. Instead, Keisha sat in stunned silence, staring at the business card in her hands while Mrs. Peterson navigated the familiar streets of her childhood neighborhood. "General Robert Washington," Mrs. Peterson said, shaking her head in amazement. "I knew I recognized that face from somewhere. That man's been in the newspapers. He's one of the highest-ranking black officers in the whole Air Force." Keisha felt sick to her stomach. Not because Robert had lied to her, he hadn't, exactly, but because she realized how the entire airplane incident must have looked from his perspective. A powerful military general watching a young black mother get harassed and humiliated while he sat right next to her. "He probably felt sorry for me," she whispered. "What's that, honey?" "Nothing," Keisha said louder. "How much further to Grandma's?" "Just a few more blocks. And Keisha, that man didn't look at you with pity. I saw how he looked at you when he was putting your baby in the car seat." "That wasn't pity." Keisha didn't want to think about how Robert had looked at her. She couldn't afford to read meaning into the kindness of a man who was so far out of her league that they might as well be living on different planets. Grandma Rose's house looked exactly the same as it had during Keisha's childhood visits. A small yellow house with white shutters and a front porch where two rocking chairs sat waiting. The yard was still perfectly maintained, with rose bushes that gave the house its nickname blooming along the front walkway. "Rose," Mrs. Peterson called as they pulled into the driveway. "They're here." The front door opened, and Keisha's grandmother appeared on the porch. At 90 years old, Rose Johnson was still a force of nature, tall and elegant with silver hair styled in soft waves and wearing a floral dress that she had clearly put on just for this occasion. "My baby girl," Grandma Rose called, opening her arms wide. Keisha carefully lifted sleeping Amara from her car seat and walked toward the porch, feeling like she was stepping back in time. This house held all her best childhood memories: summer days on the porch, the smell of Sunday dinners cooking, the sound of Grandma Rose's voice telling stories about the old days. "Let me see this precious child," Grandma Rose whispered as Keisha reached the porch. "Oh my goodness, she looks just like you did at that age." Amara stirred in her sleep, then opened her eyes and looked up at her great-grandmother with curiosity instead of fear. "Hi there, sweet girl," Grandma Rose said softly. "I'm your great-grandmama Rose. I've been waiting so long to meet you." To everyone's surprise, Amara reached out her little arms toward Rose, who carefully took her and held her close. "Well, would you look at that," Mrs. Peterson said. "That baby knows family when she sees it." They spent the evening on the front porch, Amara playing with toys that Grandma Rose had bought especially for her visit, while the adults caught up on family news. Rose wanted to hear everything about Keisha's life, her work, her apartment, her hopes for the future. "I'm proud of you, baby girl," Rose said as they watched Amara chase fireflies in the small front yard. "Raising a child on your own isn't easy, I should know." Keisha had heard pieces of her grandmother's story over the years. How Rose had been widowed young and left to raise 3 children during the 1960s, working as a seamstress and taking in laundry to make ends meet. But Rose had never talked about it like it was a hardship. She had always made it sound like an adventure. "How did you do it, Grandma? How did you stay strong when everything felt impossible?" Rose rocked slowly in her chair, watching Amara with a smile. "You know what I learned? The Lord puts people in your path right when you need them most. Sometimes it's someone who helps you with money or a job. Sometimes it's someone who just reminds you that you're worthy of respect and kindness." Keisha thought about Robert, about the way he had stood up for her without hesitation. But what if those people are just being nice? What if it doesn't mean anything? Child, kindness always means something. The question is whether you're brave enough to believe you deserve it. Later that night, after Amara had fallen asleep in the small bedroom that had once been Keisha's mother's, Keisha sat on the porch alone with her grandmother. The neighborhood was quiet except for the sound of crickets and the distant hum of air conditioners. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Anything." Do you think it's possible for someone like me to have a different kind of life? The kind where I don't have to work 3 jobs just to pay rent. Where people treat me with respect instead of like I'm a problem to be solved. Rose was quiet for a long moment. What's brought this on? Keisha told her about the airplane incident, about Robert, about feeling protected for the first time in years. She even showed her grandmother the business card. General Washington, Rose said, studying the card. I remember reading about him. First black deputy chief of staff in Air Force history. Self-made man who grew up poor and worked his way up through the ranks. He probably thinks I'm pathetic, Keisha said. A single mother who can't even afford decent luggage, getting harassed on an airplane. Or, Rose said firmly, he thinks you're a strong woman handling a difficult situation with grace and dignity. Maybe he sees something in you that you don't see in yourself. Like what? Like the same strength that got you through nursing school until life changed your plans. Like the same determination that keeps you working multiple jobs to take care of your daughter. Like the same love that saved up for months to bring your baby to meet her great-grandmother. Keisha felt tears starting to form. I'm so tired, Grandma. I'm tired of being strong all the time. I know, baby girl. But strength isn't about being tough all the time. Sometimes it's about being brave enough to let people help you. What do you mean? Rose handed the business card back to her. I mean, maybe this General Washington saw something in you worth protecting. And maybe instead of assuming he was just being polite, you should consider that he might genuinely care about what happens to you. But he's a general in the Air Force. I work in a hospital cafeteria. So what? Your grandfather was a mechanic and I was a seamstress, but we had 50 years of happiness together. Love doesn't care about job titles. Who said anything about love? Keisha protested. Rose smiled knowingly. Child, I may be 90 years old, but I still remember what it looks like when two people connect. Mrs. Peterson told me how that man looked at you and your baby. That wasn't duty or pity. That was interest. That night, lying in her childhood bedroom with Amara sleeping peacefully beside her, Keisha stared at Robert's business card. She had his email address. She could send him a simple thank you note, something professional and polite that acknowledged his help without reading too much into it. But every time she tried to compose a message in her head, it sounded either too formal or too personal. How do you thank someone for making you feel human again? How do you tell someone that their kindness meant more to you than they could possibly know? Finally, she put the card on the nightstand and closed her eyes. Maybe in the morning, after a good night's sleep and some of Grandma Rose's famous pancakes, she would know what to say. But sleep didn't come easily. Instead, she found herself replaying every moment of the flight. The way Robert had stood up to the businessman without hesitation, the calm authority in his voice, the gentle way he had helped with Amara's car seat. Most of all, she remembered the way he had looked at her when he said, "Some battles are bigger than the people who start them." What had he meant by that? And why did she have the feeling that her encounter with General Robert Washington was far from over? Saturday morning at Grandma Rose's house felt like stepping into a warm hug. The smell of bacon and pancakes filled the small kitchen, and Amara sat in a high chair that Rose had borrowed from a neighbor, happily making a mess with syrup while her great-grandmother watched with pure joy. This child has quite an appetite, Rose said, refilling Amara's plate with cut-up pancakes. She gets that from her mama, Keisha said, reaching for another piece of bacon. She had forgotten how good it felt to sit at a table where someone else had cooked the meal, where she didn't have to worry about rushing off to work or calculating how much groceries cost. Speaking of appetites, Rose said with a sly smile, have you thought any more about that business card? Keisha had been trying not to think about it, but the white card seemed to call to her from the nightstand upstairs. I don't know what to say to him. Start with thank you and see where it goes. What if he doesn't remember me? Rose laughed. Child, you think a man forgets the woman he rescued on an airplane. Especially when she was traveling with the most beautiful baby in the world. She tickled Amara under the chin, making the toddler giggle. After breakfast, They spent the day doing simple things that felt like luxuries to Keisha. Sitting on the porch watching Amara play, walking to the corner store for ice cream, visiting with neighbors who remembered Keisha as a little girl. For the first time in months, Keisha felt her shoulders relax and her mind stop racing through her endless to-do list. That evening, while Rose gave Amara a bath, Keisha finally worked up the courage to write an email. Dear General Washington, I wanted to thank you for your kindness on yesterday's flight. What you did meant more to me than you could possibly know. I've been thinking about what you said, that some battles are bigger than the people who start them. I'm not sure I understand what you meant, but I hope someday I can pay forward the kindness you showed me and Amara. Thank you for making a difficult day better. Sincerely, Keisha Johnson. She read it 5 times before hitting send, then immediately regretted it. It sounded too formal, too distant, but it was too late now. To her surprise, her phone chimed with a response less than an hour later. Dear Keisha, thank you for reaching out. I hope you and Amara are enjoying your visit with your grandmother. What I meant about battles being bigger than the people who start them is this. Every time someone stands up to discrimination, it makes it a little easier for the next person to be treated fairly. You handled yesterday's situation with incredible grace under pressure. I have a confession to make. I looked up your flight information and saw that you're returning to Detroit on Tuesday. I happen to have meetings at the Pentagon that day, but I could change my flight to match yours if you'd like some company for the trip home. No pressure at all, just an offer from someone who enjoyed our conversation. I hope that doesn't sound too forward. Robert. Keisha read the email 3 times, her heart beating faster each time. He wanted to see her again. Not out of pity or duty, but because he had enjoyed talking to her. She showed the email to Grandma Rose, who smiled knowingly. What should I say? Keisha asked. What do you want to say? That I'd love to have company on the flight home. But also that I'm scared. Scared of what? Scared of getting my hopes up. Scared of thinking this could be something when it's probably nothing. Scared of caring about someone who lives in a completely different world than I do. Rose sat down beside her on the porch swing. Baby girl, let me tell you something. Fear is just excitement wearing a disguise. That man could have ignored what happened on the airplane. He could have sent you a polite thank you email and left it at that. Instead, he's rearranging his military schedule to spend more time with you. That tells me something. What does it tell you? That maybe, just maybe, he's a little scared too. Keisha wrote back that she would love the company, and they made plans to meet at the gate before boarding. She spent the rest of the weekend in a strange combination of excitement and anxiety, second-guessing herself every few hours. On Sunday, Rose insisted they attend services at the small Baptist church where Keisha had spent many childhood Sundays. The congregation welcomed Amara with open arms, passing her from lap to lap during the service while she charmed everyone with her bright smile. Pastor Williams, who had been at the church for 40 years, made a point of mentioning their visit during announcements. We have Rose Johnson's granddaughter and great-granddaughter with us today, he said from the pulpit. For those of you who remember little Keisha, she's grown up to be a fine young woman raising a beautiful daughter. Let's show them some love. The entire congregation turned to smile and wave at them. Keisha felt tears in her eyes, not from embarrassment this time, but from the overwhelming feeling of being welcomed and celebrated. After church, as they were walking to the car, Rose's neighbor Mrs. Peterson caught up with them. Keisha, honey, I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you heard from that nice gentleman from the airport? We've exchanged a few emails, Keisha said carefully. Well, I did a little research on General Washington after y'all left Friday night. Mrs. Peterson, Rose said with a warning tone, you didn't. I certainly did, and let me tell you what I found out. That man grew up in a neighborhood just like this one. His daddy worked at the steel mill, his mama cleaned houses. He put himself through college on ROTC scholarships and worked his way up through the military, one promotion at a time. Keisha felt her heart skip. Really? Really? And you know what else? He's been a widower for 8 years, lost his wife to cancer. He's got 3 grown children who all speak very highly of him in interviews. This is not some man looking for a fling, honey. This is a man who understands family and commitment. Rose shook her head. Dollars Peterson, you should work for the FBI. I'm just saying, Mrs. Peterson continued, sometimes good things happen to good people. And Keisha, you are definitely good people. That night, as Keisha packed their bags for the trip home, she found herself thinking about what Mrs. Peterson had said. Robert wasn't some untouchable figure from a different world. He was a man who had worked hard and experienced loss and was now, for whatever reason, interested in getting to know her better. Maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to hope. Tuesday morning came too quickly. Rose cried as she hugged them goodbye, making Keisha promise to call every week and to bring Amara back for Christmas. You remember what I told you, Rose whispered in Keisha's ear as they hugged. Be brave enough to let people help you. Be brave enough to believe you deserve good things. The ride to the airport felt different this time. Instead of the anxiety she had felt on Friday, Keisha found herself looking forward to seeing Robert again. Amara seemed to sense her mother's improved mood and chattered happily in her car seat about airplanes and her new great-grandmama. Mrs. Peterson dropped them off at the departure curb with final words of encouragement. You hold your head high, honey. That man is lucky to know you. Inside the airport, Keisha made her way to the gate, her heart beating faster with each step. She spotted Robert before he saw her. He was sitting in the waiting area reading a newspaper, wearing a navy blue suit that looked like it cost more than Keisha made in a month. For a moment, her old insecurities came rushing back. What was she doing? Then Robert looked up and smiled, and all her doubts melted away. He stood up and walked over to them, his face lighting up when he saw Amara. There's my favorite traveling companion, he said, gently tickling Amara's hand. The toddler giggled and reached for him, remembering their friend from the airplane. She's been talking about the nice man on the plane all weekend, Keisha said. I think you made quite an impression. The feeling is mutual. Robert looked at Keisha with an expression that made her feel beautiful despite her simple jeans and sweater. How was your visit with your grandmother? Perfect, Keisha said and meant it. She loved meeting Amara, and she was very impressed when I told her about you. All good things, I hope. Mostly, Keisha said with a teasing smile. She did say you were probably too good to be true. Robert laughed. Smart woman, I'm looking forward to proving her wrong. They boarded the plane together, and this time Keisha found herself in first class for the first time in her life. The seats were huge and comfortable, with more legroom than she knew what to do with. The flight attendants treated her like she belonged there, offering Amara coloring books and juice without being asked. This is incredible, she whispered to Robert as they settled in for takeoff. You should get used to it, he said quietly. This is how you deserve to be treated all the time. During the flight, they talked like old friends. Robert told her about his children. His oldest daughter was a doctor, his son was a teacher, and his youngest had just graduated from Howard and was starting law school in the fall. He spoke about them with such pride and love that Keisha could see what kind of father he was. What about you? He asked. What did you want to be when you were growing up? Keisha hesitated. She had never talked about her dreams with anyone except Grandma Rose. I wanted to be a nurse. I was in nursing school when I got pregnant with Amara. What happened? Life happened. The father left, I had to drop out to work, and by the time I could think about going back, it felt too late. The prerequisites had expired, and I couldn't afford to start over. Robert was quiet for a moment. It's not too late, you know. There are programs for people in your situation. Financial aid, flexible schedules, support for single mothers. I've looked into it, Keisha said. But even with aid, I can't afford to stop working long enough to go to school full-time. What if you didn't have to stop working? What if you could do it part-time while someone helped with childcare and expenses? Keisha looked at him suspiciously. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything yet, Robert said with a smile. I'm just saying that sometimes when you have the right support system, impossible things become possible. Before Keisha could ask what he meant, Amara woke up from her nap and demanded attention. For the rest of the flight, Robert entertained the toddler with simple games and airplane facts, giving Keisha a chance to relax and just watch them together. There was something magical about seeing this powerful, important man completely focused on making a 3-year-old laugh. It reminded her of the fathers she used to watch at the park, the ones who seemed genuinely happy to be with their children instead of just going through the motions. As they descended toward Detroit, Keisha felt the familiar dread of returning to her real life. Tomorrow she would be back to double shifts and babysitter schedules and stretching every dollar until it screamed. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked, noticing her change in mood. "Just wondering how long this feeling lasts," she said honestly. "What feeling?" "The feeling of being treated like I matter, like I'm worthy of kindness and respect in first-class airplane seats." Robert's expression grew serious. "Keisha, can I tell you something?" She nodded. "In my job, I meet a lot of people. Politicians, business leaders, other military officers. Most of them have impressive titles and expensive clothes and fancy educations. But very few of them have what you have." "What's that?" "Dignity, grace under pressure. The kind of inner strength that comes from overcoming real challenges. You handled that situation on Friday with more class than most people could manage, and you're raising a beautiful, happy child while working multiple jobs to make ends meet. That's not just impressive, it's extraordinary." Keisha felt tears forming in her eyes. "You don't know how much I needed to hear that." "Then let me say it again. You are extraordinary, Keisha Johnson. And anyone who treats you as less than that is wrong." The plane touched down in Detroit, and reality began to set in. Soon they would be off the plane, Robert would get into his military transport, and Keisha would take a taxi back to her small apartment where the heat still didn't work properly, and the bills were waiting on the kitchen table. But as they gathered their belongings, Robert surprised her once again. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "What kind of proposition?" "Have dinner with me this weekend. Nothing fancy, just a chance to continue our conversation without airplane turbulence." Keisha's heart leaped, but her practical mind kicked in immediately. "I can't afford a babysitter for a dinner out. So bring Amara. I know a place that's very kid-friendly." "Robert, I don't have anything appropriate to wear to the kind of restaurants you probably go to." "Then we'll go to the kind of place where jeans are perfectly fine." "Keisha, I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm asking you to let me spend more time with the person you already are." As they walked off the plane together, Keisha made a decision that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. "Okay," she said, "let's have dinner." Robert's smile was brighter than all the airport lights combined. "Saturday at 6, I'll pick you up." "You don't even know where I live." "Then I guess you'll have to give me your address." As they exchanged phone numbers and made plans, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. For the first time in years, she was looking forward to something instead of just trying to survive until tomorrow. Maybe Grandma Rose was right. Maybe she was finally ready to be brave enough to believe she deserved good things. Saturday evening couldn't come fast enough, but it also couldn't come slow enough. Keisha spent the week alternating between excitement and panic, changing her mind about the dinner a dozen times a day. On Wednesday, she called Grandma Rose in tears. "I can't do this," she said into the phone while Amara napped. "What if he sees my apartment? What if he realizes how different our lives really are?" "Baby girl," Rose said patiently, "did it ever occur to you that maybe he already knows how different your lives are, and he asked you to dinner anyway?" "But what if? What if, what if, what if?" "Keisha, you can what if yourself right out of happiness. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith." By Friday, Keisha had convinced herself that Robert would cancel. Men like him didn't really date women like her. He would come to his senses and send a polite text making an excuse. But Friday evening, her phone rang. "Hi, it's Robert," I just wanted to confirm our plans for tomorrow and see if Amara has any food preferences I should know about. The relief in Keisha's voice was obvious. You're still coming. Of course I'm still coming. Why wouldn't I be? I just thought, never mind. Amara will eat anything, but she loves chicken nuggets and French fries. Perfect. I know just the place. Saturday afternoon, Keisha stood in front of her tiny closet trying to decide what to wear. Her options were limited. She owned exactly 3 outfits that weren't work uniforms or pajamas. She finally settled on a simple black dress that she had worn to job interviews, paired with the only nice shoes she owned. Amara, meanwhile, was having the time of her life. Keisha had explained that their friend from the airplane was coming to take them to dinner, and the toddler had been asking, "Is he here yet?" every 5 minutes for the past hour. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. Keisha took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and opened it. Robert stood in her hallway holding a small bouquet of flowers and wearing jeans, a button-down shirt and sneakers. He looked like any other dad picking up his family for dinner, not like a high-ranking military officer. "You look beautiful," he said, handing her the flowers. "You look comfortable," she said, surprised. "You said jeans were fine." "I always try to follow instructions." Amara came running from the living room and threw herself at Robert's legs. You came. "I promised I would, didn't I?" Robert said, scooping her up. "Are you ready for some chicken nuggets?" "Yes, Mama, can we go now?" Robert looked around Keisha's small apartment. The second-hand furniture, the toys scattered on the floor, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter, and his expression didn't change at all. "This is nice," he said, "very cozy." Keisha waited for the polite lie to continue, but it didn't. He seemed to genuinely mean it. They drove to a family restaurant that Keisha had never been to, but always passed on her way to work. It was the kind of place with crayons on the tables and a kids' menu full of pictures, where families brought their children for birthday celebrations and soccer team dinners. "I hope this is okay," Robert said as they were seated. "It's nothing fancy, but the food is good and they're very patient with little ones." "It's perfect," Keisha said, and meant it. She had been dreading some expensive restaurant where she would worry about Amara's behavior and feel out of place. This felt comfortable and welcoming. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing. Robert told funny stories about his own children when they were Amara's age. Keisha shared memories of growing up with Grandma Rose. Amara charmed everyone in the restaurant, including their waitress, who brought her extra fries without being asked. "Can I ask you something?" Keisha said as they shared a piece of chocolate cake for dessert. "Anything." "Why me?" "I mean, you could probably have dinner with anyone you wanted. Why a single mother who works in a hospital cafeteria?" Robert was quiet for a moment, watching Amara color on her placemat. "Can I tell you about my wife?" Keisha nodded, suddenly nervous. "Her name was Patricia. We met when we were both stationed in Germany. She was an army nurse. She was smart and funny and completely unimpressed by military rank. When we got married and started having kids, she could have hired nannies and housekeepers and all the help that military families can afford. But she insisted on doing most of it herself, because she said children needed to see their parents working hard, not just giving orders to other people." He paused, his eyes getting distant. "When she got sick, toward the end, she made me promise her something. She said, 'Robert, when you're ready to love someone again, don't look for another officer's wife. Look for someone who understands what it means to fight for your family every single day.'" Keisha felt tears forming in her eyes. "The moment I saw you on that airplane," Robert continued, "fighting to comfort your daughter while some ignorant man tried to make you feel small, I thought about Patricia's words. You have that same strength she was talking about. That same dignity under pressure." "I don't feel strong most of the time," Keisha whispered. "That's what makes you remarkable. You do what needs to be done even when you don't feel capable of doing it." After dinner, Robert drove them home, but instead of dropping them off, he asked if he could come up for a few minutes. "I know it's getting late for Amara," he said, but I have something I wanted to discuss with you." Upstairs in her small living room, while Amara played with her toys, Robert pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "Remember what I said on the plane about nursing school?" Keisha nodded. "I did some research. There's a program at Wayne State specifically designed for single parents who want to return to school. They offer evening and weekend classes, on-campus childcare, and full financial assistance for qualified applicants." He handed her the folder. "The next application deadline is in 2 weeks." Keisha stared at the paperwork. "Robert, I can't accept charity." "It's not charity. It's a legitimate program funded by grants and scholarships. You would have to maintain good grades and complete all the requirements just like any other student. But even if I got in, I'd still have to cut back my work hours. I can't afford that." Robert took a deep breath. "What if you didn't have to worry about that?" "What do you mean?" "What if someone wanted to help with living expenses while you were in school? Not as charity, but as an investment in someone they believe in." Keisha felt her heart stop. "Robert, no, I can't let you pay my bills." "Why not?" Because what would that make me?" Robert looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned on his face. "Keisha, look at me." She met his eyes reluctantly. "I'm not asking you to be anything other than exactly who you are. I'm not offering to support you in exchange for anything. I'm offering to help because I think you deserve the chance to achieve your dreams, and because I can afford to help. But what if nursing school doesn't work out? What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But at least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you had tried." Keisha looked at the folder in her hands, then at Amara playing happily on the floor, then back at Robert. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Robert smiled. "Because 8 months from now I won't barely know you. 8 months from now I'm hoping we'll know each other very well." Something in his tone made Keisha's heart skip. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd like to see where this goes between us. I'm saying I think you're amazing and I want to be part of your life while you become everything you're capable of becoming. And if I say yes to school but no to whatever this is between us, then I'll still help with school. My offer isn't conditional on anything except your promise to work hard and take care of yourself and Amara." Keisha stared at him in amazement. "I don't understand you." "What don't you understand?" "How you can be so sure about someone you just met." Robert smiled and glanced over at Amara, who had fallen asleep on the floor surrounded by her toys. "Sometimes you just know. Patricia used to say that love doesn't follow a timeline, it follows the heart." The word love hung in the air between them, scary and wonderful and full of possibility. "If I do this," Keisha said slowly, "if I apply to nursing school and let you help, what happens when you realize I'm not as special as you think I am?" Robert stood up and gently lifted sleeping Amara from the floor. "Where's her bedroom?" Keisha led him down the short hallway to Amara's tiny room, where Robert carefully placed the little girl in her crib and covered her with a blanket. For a moment, they both stood looking down at her peaceful face. "To answer your question," Robert said quietly, "I'm not going to realize you're not special. I'm going to spend the next few months discovering just how special you really are." He turned to face her in the dim light of the hallway. "Keisha, I've lived long enough to know the difference between infatuation and something real. What I feel when I look at you and Amara, this sense of rightness, of coming home, that's not something that happens often. I'm not going to walk away from it just because it's complicated." Standing there in her small apartment hallway, with her daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, and this incredible man looking at her like she was precious, Keisha finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, good things really could happen to people like her. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay to nursing school. Okay to all of it. School help seeing where this goes, all of it." Robert's smile was like sunrise. "Really?" "Really, but I have one condition." "Name it." "If at any point you change your mind about me, about us, you have to promise to still let me finish school." Don't leave me halfway through, with no way to support my daughter. Robert took her hands in his. Keisha, I'm not going to change my mind, but if it makes you feel safer, then yes, I promise. They stood there for a moment, hands linked, both of them barely believing what was happening. So what now? Keisha asked. Now you fill out those applications. Now we take things one day at a time and see what develops. Now you let yourself believe that you deserve everything good that's coming your way. 6 months later, Keisha was halfway through her first semester of nursing school, carrying a 3.8 GPA and loving every minute of her classes. Amara was thriving in the university childcare program, and Robert had become a constant, steady presence in both their lives. He attended Amara's preschool performances and Keisha's nursing school pinning ceremony. He helped with homework and celebrated small victories, and never once made either of them feel like burdens or charity cases. On Christmas morning, as they sat around the tree in Robert's comfortable house, the house that had slowly become home for all three of them, Keisha thought about how completely her life had changed. "Mama," Amara said, climbing into her lap with a new doll, "are we going to live here forever?" Keisha looked at Robert, who was smiling at them from across the room, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude and love and hope for the future. "I think we might, baby girl, I think we just might." Outside, snow was beginning to fall, and inside, a family that had found each other against all odds was celebrating their first Christmas together, with many more to come. Sometimes the best things in life really do come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes a terrible airplane experience leads to a lifetime of happiness. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to believe you deserve good things, the universe conspires to prove you right.